Hi, this is Ben Gresswitz, Town Chair of Ardencroft, and thanks for joining me for this presentation of a presentation I gave at the public forum on our municipal charter changes in October on the 19th of this year. Um, this is a little bit modified from that presentation because it's not an interactive audience, but we'll have a lot of content that is good for exposing you to some of the concepts and the recommendations and reasoning behind recommendations of our governance documents special committee, a committee of 6 people that have been working hard to look at ways we can modernize and create more flexibility for our town to exist um, due to changes in technology and wishes to have a little bit more autonomy and self-governance. So with that, I'll begin. The agenda is just to go over some background and purpose for the forum. I'll give an overview of the recommendations, which is the bulk of the presentation, and skip over the discussion as you can't talk back to me. Then just go into next steps in our process. So on to background. It's important to get on the same level playing field here on just understanding what these various tools we have are that we use to govern ourselves as a municipality. And so here it kind of highlights our charter, ordinances, resolutions, policies, and procedures. And among these, the charter is really the biggest, most important document to us as it empowers us. It's really the state that grants us the power for our own self-governance. Gives us the ability to make our own ordinances and resolutions and policies and procedures. So that's a pretty important thing, and this presentation is really about the charter mainly, but these things kind of have interplay with each other, so it's important to understand them all. The charter, because it's a state grant of power, we need to go to the legislature to give us that power, and the governor needs to sign any our charter to be an incorporated municipality. We are one already. We're just looking to make some changes to that charter. And generally, any local laws for our municipality can only be equal in restriction or of greater restrictions than county or state law. It can't be looser on the law. Then the rest of these things are all kind of determined by the village. We don't have to go to the state for them. The ordinances are probably next of importance. They are meant to be sort of our long-term law or code, and consequently, to change them, it takes a little bit more effort, as they are, things that we don't want to change on a whim. So currently, it takes 3 meetings to actually introduce or revise an ordinance, and I'll say more on a revision we're proposing for that. But I'll move on to resolutions. Resolutions are another thing just determined by the village. It is a formal decision that gets recorded in our town meeting minutes. And it can be a form of policy. It can be just a recognition, an opinion of the body. It can also just be an administrative action saying we're going to have a special meeting next month or something to that effect. Policies and procedures, those two terms are sometimes, there's a considerable overlap with them, but just generally, they can be something that the village determines in a resolution, or they could just be something that the committees or officers decide on as their policies and how they operate. They can be written or just practiced, and an example is our Public Works Committee's policy to have contractors show proof of insurance before we hire them. A little more background, just to say that all the three Ardens decided in the mid-70s to establish themselves as incorporated municipalities. There were 3 unincorporated villages prior to that, all with their own dates of establishment. But in 75 for the other 2 and 76 for us, we decided we wanted to establish more autonomy and home rule, and becoming an incorporated municipality and having a charter was the way to do that. There have been some changes, or at least one I found, or our committee found, regarding changes to the charter that went to the state and were passed. One of them was in 1996 to change our definition of a quorum for how many people need to meet to attend a meeting for us to legally vote on things. That was changed from 20 to 14 in 1996. But this governance document special committee is proposing a lot more of a wholesale change or a comprehensive change. A lot of the wording will be the same in a lot of sections, but we're making a number of tweaks. We're saying let's get rid of some large sections that are no longer needed, or whatnot. So varying different degrees of change, and I'll go into that soon. But we're intending to pass this by the town as a whole thing, and with one vote, not voting to do individual items. And we don't want to individually go to change each of these things with the state. We want to do it all in one sitting. So the purpose of the forum was to have time to give share these recommendations and get some feedback. All the proposed changes that are in this presentation are presented in concept. They're not really speaking, they're not sharing specific wording for the most part. And we've consulted with our village attorney, Ted Rosenthal, all along the way with any of the proposed changes, and have gotten a lot of good feedback from him to improve some of the language and ideas that we're going for here. The feedback that we got from the forum helped inform the draft charter, and that's being shared now ahead of the November town meeting, where we'll have some opportunity for some further questions and discussion. We intend to have a final charter prepared ahead of the January town meeting and vote at that meeting, and if approved, send it to the General Assembly. So here's the overview of our recommendations. First, I should say that all these things are presented in concept, like I said before, but they're also grouped into categories. And so when we talk about the correct category, we're talking about areas that we want to correct in the current charter. And when we talk about the include category, we're saying that some of the languages excludes people currently, and we'd like to be more inclusive in our language. Modernize is an area where we find language that is a bit out of date, or things that we could improve to be more like more modern charters. Simplify is just to cut down on some needlessly wordy sections. Clarify is to give clarity when there's ambiguity or confusing language. We want to make sure that if there's an intent expressed, that it's really expressed clearly and not need too much interpretation. Conform is a section that is largely about just saying that since our original charter, there's been a number of laws, particularly the Freedom of Information Act on the federal and the state level, that give us guidance on what to do for keeping records, sharing records, giving meeting notice, that sort of stuff. And we can simply just conform to the standards sometimes on those things. Change is where we see that something may not be suitable anymore and we're recommending a change. And localize is probably the most interesting or innovative section here. It's really an opportunity we see for a number of places where we could relegate from the current charter some policies that we would describe by ordinance or by policy, and not have to go back to the state every time we want to tweak that. And sometimes there's good reason for that as technology changes, or we just want to have some adaptability or greater autonomy. So going into the correct section, this is real quick. Generally, there's some typos we noticed, and we want to fix them. Maybe the more interesting thing here is a town meeting. The second bullet here, it talks about the town meeting as a body feeling something is appropriate. We think deem is a better thing than feel, but generally just typos and that sort of thing. Include, looking for better inclusive language, dropping pronouns and things that connote a gender, like his successor would be a successor. We can just say chair instead of chairperson, and certainly not chairman. And omit this needless reference to male or female in our eligible voter definition. I think we just know we're talking about humans, and if they're 18 or older, they should be legit and residents. Modernize. So this is a section where we might make things a little bit more like modern charters, and I'll start with this idea of a preamble. This is something recommended by the National Civic League in their model city charter. It's something that a suggestion that the Arden group that's also doing a similar effort right now, and their charter is taking up and creating their own preamble. And the National Civic League gives these recommended components of a preamble. You should state your source of authority, so something like we the people of Ardencroft under the Constitution and laws of the state of Delaware. State your action taken, do hereby adopt this charter. Intent is really, I think, the main reason why you want a preamble, because it really is an opportunity to set a tone for our community identity and what makes us unique as a village and what our values are. So with that, I'll share with you the text of the draft preamble. Its coloring here is dividing it into those three parts. So it says, we the people of the village of Ardencroft, under the Constitution and laws of the state of Delaware, in order to secure the benefits of self-governance, do hereby adopt this charter and confer upon the village the following powers, subject to the following restrictions, and prescribed by the following procedures and governmental structure. By this action, we secure the benefits of home rule and affirm the values from our Georgist, conservationist, and integrationist history, including equal opportunity, direct democracy, common land ownership, environmental stewardship, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Just another modernized thing is that there was several references to having a corporate seal and when to use it and things like that in the current charter. By the way, if you didn't catch this, the section numbers that are referenced in the current charter are these numbers that you see next to things here with that squiggly section symbol. So in sections 1, 6, and 15, the corporate seal appears, we don't have any problem with saying that we can have a corporate seal. We'll just call it an official seal. And we just don't want to specify times where we need to use it, because in modern day, you know, proper signatures of various officers and things like that should suffice, and we don't need to use a seal. Clarify is getting into some ambiguous stuff, making sure we're serving the intent, and also talking about some confusing language. And this may be a bigger one to think about, a bigger change, though it really is just about wording. But it's something we've probably gotten used to, this notion of town meeting. But it's a confusing term, and it actually was pointed out by our attorney that often when dealing with people from the county or the state, he spends about 5 minutes trying to, talk about what this town meeting concept really is. One thing that's confusing about it is that Ardencroft is a village. So we're not a town, we're a village. Why do we say town meeting? And it can really refer to a number of things. So there's the traditional form of government known as the town meeting, or open town meeting as we are, which I'll talk about in a second. The legislative body of eligible voters is often referenced in the charter, saying that power is vested in the town meeting as that legislative body. And then when that legislative body meets, it's an event that we call the town meeting, colloquially, but in the charter we call it the meetings of the town meeting, which sounds awkward and clunky and redundant and repetitive. So here are our proposals. So first of all is to only use the term town meeting when it's in reference to our form of government, because our form of government is an open town meeting as opposed to other U.S. municipal government forms of government, like the mayor council form or council mayor, city commissioner, or representative town meeting. Those are all different forms found in municipalities throughout the US. Ours is an open town meeting. And so if you're not familiar with that, the town meeting in general, representative and open, are really just found throughout New England, with the exception of the Ardens, as far as I know. So it's kind of rare around these parts, and people aren't familiar with the concept. The open town meeting is, something that makes a municipality a direct democracy like ours, and basically every eligible voter is a member of the legislative body, and so everybody is part of that. And rather than having a council or somebody representing you, you can represent yourself on debates and votes and policy decisions. So when that legislative body, we are recommending, we call not the town meeting, but the village assembly. So by doing this change, we would sound like a legislative body, like the General Assembly of the state, or Arden's Town Assembly, they call themselves, though they keep town in there, which I think is a little problematic. The other benefit is it still sounds like residents are gathering when you talk about a village assembly, everybody getting together in the village. And it uses the term village, not town, which is ending some confusion there. And it pairs nicely with the word meeting without sounding repetitive. So our recommendation when we're talking about the town meeting as a meeting event is that we don't say meetings of the town meeting or town meeting. We would call it the meetings of the village assembly. And in our documents, we can reference it differently as village assembly meeting, or meeting when it's clear that we're talking about the meeting of the village assembly. And colloquially, we can refer to it as a village meeting if we want to, and put it on our signs at town village meeting this Thursday or whatnot. But this is our recommendation because we think this will help us really get a little clearer um, and uh, and not so awkward in our language, though we recognize it as a bit of a change to get used to. Other clarify stuff. Definition section in here. We already had eligible voter and resident, but we tweaked it a little bit. It was saying eligible voters were residents above 18. We think the intent was probably 18 or older, and that's what we've been practicing. So we're going to clarify that. The resident definition talked about living in the village for at least 30 days, but it wasn't clear that, even if you lived here 30 days, but that was 50 years ago and you live in another state, you can't vote here, right? The intent was to be a current resident. We also think we should clarify that it should be a resident that's here for the majority of the year. We added the definitions for ordinance, resolution, and policy and motion that I was talking about a little bit at the beginning. And then further clarifies items here. The meeting location of the village assembly, we're saying it currently just mentions the guild hall or other suitable public place. We've been meeting in the buzzware since who knows when. We want to list the buzzware. We also want to say it can be a virtual meeting in whole or in part, since we've undergone that format of it in recent years. Treasurer section talks about it being of service to the coordinating committee. We just want to make sure that it's clear that it's also service to the village assembly. And the coordinating committee's role is mentioned as advisory in nature in the current charter. It doesn't really say advisory to whom. We would like to specify that it's advisory to the village assembly. Simplify. This is some lengthy sections that we think we can cut down the wording on. There is a very long, like page-long description of the metes and bounds of the village. We're in the territorial limit section, which is the second section. And I think it's kind of prohibitive when you start reading this document and you're like wanting to learn about the town and our powers and stuff. And then you have to read through this really hard to discern thing that lists landowners who no longer exist and all these different things. Our recommendation is to move that to an appendix, so Exhibit A, and also we're adding in a map that sort of shows what those metes and bounds descriptions mean. But all that language can just be moved to the back of the document and reference in the front of the document and quickly move on. There's also a section that talks about vacancies. We feel there really isn't any reason why you'd need to define reasons for vacancies. It's just if you have a vacancy, you need to fill it. And that's what we want that section to focus on. And there's a lot of lengthy statements on record keeping and of eligible voters and things for the registration committee to do. And all we think we need to say, and if what the lawyer agrees, is just to keep it simple, say they'll keep an accurate record of eligible voters. Conform. So mostly getting into FOIA laws here, the Freedom of Information Act, and knowing now that there are some laws concerning this that we can just follow from the state or the federal government. So this thing on record keeping here found in section 6 and 12, we're actually just going to make a record keeping section that succinctly states some of this content. It's also an effort to modernize so that we can Be clear that records can be both electronic or tangible, and that they should just be maintained in a secure manner wherever they live. And then access to those records are subject to FOIA laws, and that is, basically allowing anybody to see pretty much anything they want on the public record. Change section. Here's some things we don't think are suitable anymore. So first one is to omit the section 14 in the charter that talks about having a police force. We've never had a police force, and we feel it's unnecessary and problematic, maybe dangerous to allow ourselves to have one. Unnecessary because we have police forces with the county and the state that can help protect us. We have the safety committee that helps us enforce our ordinances, and all those ordinances, if there needs to be any punishment at all, it's really through a fine, not arresting anybody. No real need to keep the peace, as it were. And most of the time, even they just give a warning and the matter's taken care of. It's problematic too because we don't have a budget for hiring police. We don't want to be also having a budget for training police and making sure that they have the proper training, go to a police academy and whatnot. And generally find it not a good situation to think about having a neighbor be able to arrest another neighbor. I think that could cause a good deal of ugliness, and so we generally will say, let's omit this whole section. There's a piece in here that requires more candidates on the ballot for the election than there are seats to fill for each committee and things. And so that oftentimes, well, it's required in the charter document. We just don't want people to think that the vote was invalid or anything like that if we are unable to meet that. So we want to make it still strong, because if we want to have choices, and we want the language to say make every effort to have more candidates on the ballot than there are seats to fill. And I alluded to this at the beginning, this idea of charter additions and changes. I'm sorry, ordinance additions and changes. We don't want to have 3 meetings to make a change anymore. We do want it to be more than just made on a whim. We think that 2 meetings will suffice. So you would have a first meeting to read the change or the new ordinance. It would go out in the minutes. People would see the minutes and say, well, oh, they're voting on this. I care about this. I want to weigh in on it. I'll attend the second meeting, the next one coming up, and I'll hear it again and join the discussion, the debate, and then voice my opinion and my vote. We think that that is sufficient, and will make things kind of move along in a way that we think sometimes people are a little deterred to come to our town meetings, because it feels like we're talking about the same thing, meeting after meeting. We want to be able to move on some of these things. Localize. So again, this is where we want to relegate from the charter to the ordinance, or maybe a policy, something that we don't want to keep going back to state if we want to change it in the future, and give ourselves some flexibility, some autonomy sometimes, and really allow ourselves to sometimes experiment and say, like, what if we change this, and oh, maybe it's not that great, we can change it back and we don't have to go back to the state, right? So rather than permanently change it now with what we think might be a good idea, these relegations or localizations will enable us to change it back more easily if we have second thoughts. So with that, the first item here is a number of things. It's localize, it's conform, clarify, and change, and it's regarding the notice of meetings. So we currently do a lot of effort to make sure everybody knows there's a meeting happening in the village, and we send something out by mail to everybody. But um, we can state in the charter just that we're going to follow the state and federal law and FOIA that says we'll post information at our meeting site 7 days prior to the meeting, and then further specify the way we want to have notice of meetings happen in the village. And that's partly because, we want to be a little more flexible in the future, as we've realized that technology wise, many people don't want to just get snail mail. They want to get an electronic delivery of notices and that sort of thing. It's pretty costly to put together all these minutes and send them out to each address with all the postage. So we want to give people an opt-in, opt-out of electronic delivery. We want to also, for those that opt for the physical delivery, just clarify that delivery to that address would constitute delivery to eligible voters at the address. If I get my mail and I forget to share it with my wife and she's an eligible voter, it still, it meets the bar as far as what's in the village control. We just want to clarify that. The next one is a localize and a change. It's regarding the number and timing of village meetings. So our proposal for the charter would be to set a minimum number of annual village assembly meetings and make that minimum 4. So that's what the number of meetings that Arden and Arden Town have. We have 6 currently. And we've voted in the past at town meetings to change it to 4. For whatever reason, we have not, it was not something that got to the state to change it in the charter. I'm not sure what the story is behind that, but we know that a lot of people would like to try this. So, but we also want to make sure that we never have less than 4, because we are a governing body, we're a municipality, and we have business to take care of, and we don't want to slack off in the sense, or just keep things the same and have no opportunity to change things or raise new ideas. So we'll set a minimum, and then specify that the rest, any number and timing of things, would be set by the village assembly. And in a separate ordinance, which we would vote on separately, our proposal would be to set the 4, try it out for a while, set up which months and the timing of it that would work well. And like I said, we can always go back on things a little more easily if it's an ordinance, if we find that it's not working for us. But we think it's time to give this a try. Generally, the charter proposal, though, here is just to set a minimum and give the town the ability to change how many meetings there are. The next localize is a registration committee membership, small little thing. The registration committee is established by the charter, as you need one to have elections and other committees and all that sort of stuff. So it's appropriate to be in the charter, but we want to give some flexibility for how many people might serve on that committee. It says 3 in the charter right now. There is some thought that perhaps, we could use more members for that. Many committees have 5 members. We want to keep it at 3 for now, but have the ability to reconsider that in the future. So we're saying let's set a minimum of 3 in the charter, each serving 2-year terms, and then reflect the current practice in a new ordinance that would just say that they'll have 3 members. This next localized is also a change. It's regarding fines. We currently in the charter set a maximum fine of $100. Keep in mind that that was set in 1976, and in today's dollars, $100 of 1996 is really more like $529. So we would like to be able to adapt the fine amount with inflation as time goes on, adjust it now, state in the charter that it'll be set by the village assembly, and create a new ordinance that sets what the maximum is, and for starters, make it $500. Final localize is also a change. It's regarding contracting. There's a section that we just want to simply state that policies regarding contracting will be established by the village assembly, and then give us some time to really think through some of the intricacies of what we think is appropriate when we contract with other parties, establish who might sign contracts, whether it might be an officer or a relevant committee chair, etc. When is a threshold, perhaps what we want to give multiple quotes, and that sort of stuff, maybe just give some guidance. Some of it could be found in an ordinance, but we think a lot of it could be just general policy. So we're going to skip discussion on further ideas, go to next steps. Next step for the charter is to make the draft charter available ahead of the November 16th town meeting. That is available now with a link that's been shared. The further legal review will be happening between the town meeting and our January town meeting, where ahead of that January town meeting, we'll distribute a final draft to each household. The vote will be held at January town meeting. If that gets approved, we'll send it to our senator and our representative for sponsorship in their respective chambers. And then when that passes the legislature, we would get the governor's signature by the end of the legislative session in June, and be all ready to have our new charter in play by July 1st, which is the plan. And then next steps for the ordinances. So all these sort of relegations from charter to ordinance need to be set up in new ordinances. We will need to introduce them in January, have the readings in January and March, have some discussion, and vote by May so that they're also ready for a new charter in July. And that is the plan. Really appreciate you listening to all these recommendations. We've spent a lot of time on it, and would still be very open to hear your thoughts and any questions you have. You can reach out to me at chair@ardencroft.delaware.gov, or text or call me at 302-385-6222. Thanks so much.